Prior to her mother's passing on November 22, 1995, Elisa was born on February 11, 1989. The incident of child abuse is referred to as the worst case of child abuse they had ever seen. Her 6 years of life were spent in constant pain and suffering. When her father, Gustavo, immigrated to the United States, he met her mother, Awilda, in a Fort Greene homeless shelter. Gustavo is of Cuban descent. Her mother was an addict who used drugs on her body constantly, even while she was pregnant. Awilda had been using drugs at the time Elisa was born. Her husband expressed his concern to social workers, who then granted him full custody of Awilda. Gustavo was a very loving father who wanted to provide his daughter with the best care possible despite his lack of parenting skills. He even sought out advice. Then, Elisa was sent to preschool, where her teachers praised her for being a very loving person. But in November 1991, it was when things changed for the worst. Awilda was granted permission to care for Elisa unsupervised, stating that her addiction was cured, according to a social worker. After the incident, Awilda's eldest children notified relatives that Elisa had been given unfair treatment by her mother, but surprisingly did not inform authorities about the event. It was reported by the teachers that Elisa suffered bruising while she was heading home. The child confessed that she was beaten and locked into a cabinet. Later on, as a result, her father reported that Elisa was bedwetting as well as showing a lack of control in her bowels. To make matters worse, Awilda was even proud enough that she confessed the abuse to her social worker. In 1993, Gustavo planned a flight back to Cuba with her daughter. It was scheduled that they would fly in May 1994, but unfortunately, Gustavo died on May 26 due to complications of his lungs. This seized any opportunity for Elisa to escape from her abusive mother. Elisa, clueless, asked her mother where his father was, only for her to be screamed back, stating that, "Your father's dead." After that tragic event, Awilda requested full custody of Elisa, where she was granted temporary custody. Elisa was then supported by social workers and Gustavo's cousin who also applied for custody. In 1994, Awilda was finally given full custody of her child despite the head teacher and Prince Michael of Greece being in opposition to the custody. The abuse continued with her mother being in full control. Awilda pulled out Elisa from her private school and placed her in a public school instead, where she was reported to show signs of abuse and neglect by teachers. It's even reported that she had difficulty walking, and had no incentive to communicate with other people. Without any escape, her mother confined her in a room for hours on end, with no access to a bathroom. Eventually, Elisa was sent to the hospital with injuries that were left untreated for days. When teachers noticed that she was constantly abused by her mother, they made an attempt to report the abuse to the authorities, yet from a lack of evidence, the report wasn't successful. Even neighbors notified authorities of child abuse, stating that they heard Awilda spewing insults to her child and the cries of her daughter telling her mother to stop. It just doesn't stop there. According to her siblings, Elisa was not only reported to have suffered physical abuse. Awilda was reported to have violated her, burned her body, forced Elisa's head to be used as a mop, and other vile acts unimaginable. Eventually, Elisa succumbed to death from a brain hemorrhage by the constant abuse. Awilda was charged with second-degree murder at the Supreme Court of New York, where she pleaded guilty. Eventually, she was sentenced to 15 years of jail up to prison for life. While Elisa's stepfather served several years in prison,